Hey everyone, Dave Floss here with Prometheus Falling Toys and Mentally Unbalanced. And today we are going back and revisiting the Einscan SP 3D scanner. So stick around. So about a year ago, I did a video on the Einscan SP 3D scanner. This is about a $2,500 3D scanner that gets down to 0.5 millimeters, right? Really, really fine detail. And I have tried and tested both before I bought this scanner and since buying this scanner, a number of different devices. And the bottom line right off the bat is I still use this scanner. It is my go-to scanner. Between the capabilities and the software and just my overall experience and success, this remains the one that was the best value for my dollar. Doesn't mean it was cheap, but it absolutely has given me the greatest level of quality from everything from really, really small, fine details to good medium-size scans and just the ability to really work and manipulate. So with that, I wanted to kind of talk about what I've learned in the last year, because when I did my first video, I shared some high-level examples of some various things, and I've really kind of fine-tuned my approach. Things like being able to actually work in an area that's not completely pitch black is one. Working with different types of materials. So I'm going to go through just a few of them today and actually share my experiences. So the first thing I wanted to share was I'm going to do a scan of this little floating head guy from I think this is I almost said A Nightmare Before Christmas. That's wrong. Big Trouble in Little China. So it's a little floating head. I got it with a figure. It's got all little eyes. You can see it's got a lot of fine details on them, texture and things sticking out. But one of the things that I've learned that can be very challenging is when you have odd sized, it doesn't really matter if they're big or small, but odd sizes that don't fit perfectly still, right? They either lean, they don't have enough edge, and especially if I want to do more than one angle, right? If I want to do, kind of a right side up angle, but then I might want to do a top down, and there's certain materials or items that are just very challenging. When I do the Thanos glove, which I'm going to do in a little bit, it's got a nice flat surface right on the bottom. It sits completely still on the turntable. That's great. But if you have things that move, that can represent a challenge. Now, I have a couple different ways of approaching this. One of them is using just the smallest amount. And I don't even know how well you're going to see this. It's going to be on the tip of my finger, right? It is the smallest amount of just modeling clay, a little something that you can kind of, for example, stick on the bottom, doesn't damage the model at all, gives you a little bit of, kind of filling in a gap so that it doesn't teeter, it doesn't roll, it doesn't fall. I call it the slightest amount of adhesion to just keep your model steady. Now, the trade-off with this is that if you use that and it's visible to the scanner, you're going to scan it as part of your model. Not necessarily a big deal, maybe something you can clean out with your mesh mixer or just cut off at the end. But if you really want to try to maintain some of those details, my other option is, and these are all meant to be very simple options, stuff you can pick up easily anywhere, are these little round Velcro like cable ties. And the reason I like these is that you can shape them to different sizes, especially for things that are where your model is more rounded, and have it kind of just gently sit on top of there. Now, what's that going to look like? Well, let's find out by actually going in and taking a scan of this item. So I'm going to place my item. I'm going to place the item right in the middle of my scanning bed. We're going to see it in just a minute when I load up the software. We're going to go into our software. First, of course, we're going to pick our scanner. In this case, it's the Einscan SP. We're going to initialize our scanner. We're going to initialize our scanner. Now, I just recently calibrated the scanner. The one thing I would also recommend with this particular unit is frequent calibration. It doesn't take long. It comes with all the steps and tools needed to do the calibration, especially if you've made really any movement at all. If you move the scanner around, if you move the bed around, anytime you're kind of touching or moving stuff, you definitely want to calibrate your scanner. I like to also just kind of recalibrate my, because even unforeseen things, tapping the desk, knocking at the table, at least once a month, or especially if you're doing multiple scans at different angles and they're not really aligning well, or even one scan looks like it's not quite lining up and doesn't look quite right. Sometimes the easiest, fastest solution, go and do a quick calibration and redo your scan. And I've had nothing but success. I've been scanning with this device for well over 18 months, maybe even up to 2 years now. Um, and I'm going to just say hundreds upon hundreds of scans. And those little tips like recalibrating every now and then make a huge difference. Also making sure there's space around the scanner as well. You don't want other objects or obstacles, even if you don't think they're anywhere near it, that are getting picked up, because that can throw off what it is scanning. So a little bit of space, a good 8 inches basically all the way around the scanning bed area of total free and clear, and really want to kind of keep nothing behind it, right behind where it's scanning, at least not for within a couple feet, so that it doesn't accidentally pick up other objects and think it's part of your project. So we're going to go ahead and open up a brand new job here. We're just going to go new work, right? And we're going to slide this over, and you can see I've got a bunch of stuff I've been working on, and we're going to just call this floating head. Floating head. All right, so we're going to go floating head. Now, here is where things have really kind of shifted for me, because in my video last year, everything I was doing was textured scans. That is not only scanning the object, but photographing the object and creating a 3D color rendering that you can see. Now, of course, when you print it, it's just printing in whatever color material that your printer is. But this gave like this would be more of a texture scan, would not only give you the 3D and the look, which would be really a big deal if you were doing like 3D animation. You wanted the colors, the details. Here's the interesting thing. I'm not doing that. I'm doing almost all reprint, right? Scanning, manipulating, and then printing. So seeing the color details for most of my objects isn't necessary. In fact, the only time I'd say it's necessary is if I really want to look at finer details with that overlay and make sure that my scan really turned out the way I wanted it. But for most items, it's completely unnecessary. Now, here's why that makes a bit of a difference. When it's scanning, especially if it's doing multiple scans, multiple passes as it turns, or if you're doing different multiple scanned angles, like scanning one way and then scanning a completely different way, it's at least 50% faster if you're not scanning texture, because it's only scanning the surface, not trying to get colors and those other visual details that are unnecessary for print. So for today's test, we're going to actually start with the non-texture scan. I want to give a demonstration of a non-texture scan since we haven't done that before. So I'm going to click on non-texture scan and just click apply. It's going to open up our brand new project. Over here, you can see with these settings, I really have so much good quality with HDR that I leave HDR on. I think that is a fundamental key to this device, is that HDR setting, because it really looks at all of the lighting around you and adjusts your brightness settings for the best possible scans. It keeps you from having to worry about this brightness. Do I need a little brighter? Do I need a little less? And it does a really good, I'm going to say 90 to 95% of the time, HDR alone gets it right. And it's only for maybe some really unique models, especially those with odd colors or reflective surfaces, which any scanner is going to have a challenge with, where I might want to go in and manually dial up or down that brightness. So we're going to leave HDR on for this first pass test. Now, we're going to use the turntable because it's built in and makes it work really well. The one thing I'm going to change on this one, just in the interest of time, is I'm going to only go with 6 scans. I want minimum 8. So we're going to go with 8 scans. That means it's going to scan, turn, scan, and it's going to divide that into 8 equal rotations of a 360-degree turn. And then you'll see when we hit the scan button, we'll just see how fast that's able to go. So let's go ahead and do that now. So I hit it. The very first scan always takes a minute because now the HDR is kicking in. It is testing the light. It is using various different colors, blue rays and other rays. And now we can see you can kind of see in that upper corner there, there's our very first pass. That's just one pass, one little scan. We got 7 more of those to go. So we're going to let that run. And maybe this is where I can do some time lapse. All right, our scan is done. A couple minutes, not particularly long at all to do those 8 passes. Now, if I had done 12, it would have probably given me a little bit more fill and detail, added another minute or two. But again, we're really only talking about a couple minutes to do a really good 3D scan. Now, once the scan is done, the first thing we do is we just decide, do we accept the scan? Down here, we're going to say, yep, I want to apply it. We're going to take it. Now, the thing is that it's very small object, particularly zoomed in. But if I start to zoom out of this item here, let me see. Come on, baby, zoom out. Oh, I guess you don't want to zoom out today. Let's see. There we go. All right. So we're going to go ahead and zoom out a little bit, pull it back, and now we get to see. Now, again, remember, this was non-textured scan, so we didn't get any of the coloring. We didn't get anything else. We're just getting the 3D representation. Now, what I want to really call out here is, of course, there's going to be some areas on the top that the scanner didn't see. There's some gaps here, right? But overall, the quality looks really good. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to optimize this, which is just a setting. Gives us kind of a really good, if we don't zoom in too much, we can see a lot of those details there around the eyes, around the mouth. Okay, I'm happy with this. Now, here's the thing. Before I move on, here's the interesting thing. Here is what is sitting on the printer bed, the scanner bed. Here's what's sitting on the scanner bed. It is the item on top of that little roll of Velcro that I had it standing on. So it's standing on this. This is how it was sitting on the bed as it turned. What do you not see in our scan? Because I used a black surface, which the scanner, unless I really want to take the time to dial it in, black is going to be one of those colors where the light coming in that's scanning is going to get absorbed. It doesn't reflect back at all. It can't, basically, it can't see it. The best way to put it is it can't see it. So what we have here is now I was able to get the scan of my object. It was able to sit on something that kept it still and kept it from moving because it's kind of got an odd, rough shape on the bottom. And my final scan eliminates automatically what it was sitting on. So this was a great way where I could get a quick scan and not have to worry about going into Mesh Mixer and making changes or digging things out or changing it. It's really already in really good, ready to go condition. So we're going to confirm this. How do we know we're ready, or do we think we're ready? Well, we know that there's a couple areas. We can see them in yellow where it didn't quite grab the information. And as we roll underneath, we're probably going to see, yep, she is just empty. Right? You couldn't scan anything. Now, there's 2 ways we could approach this. The first way would be is to take our item exactly as we had before, but turn it 90 degrees. Scan it again, get those details underneath, those details, the things it couldn't see the first time when it was right side up. Now, that could absolutely work. Totally could work. Fill in those details. The other thing you can try before you do that is, oftentimes, especially if you're less concerned with all of the detail on the bottom, right? Let's just take a chance here. And it may not work for this particular bottom because it really is like rough and tough all over. I think we'll see a better demonstration of what I'm going to show you when we do the Thanos glove, the Infinity Gauntlet. But let's try it here anyway, and that we're going to just tell the software, fill it in. Fill in the model, any spots that haven't been filled in, and let's see what happens. So to do that, we have this option here called Mesh. We're going to mesh our model. If we were to go under unwatertight, it's just going to fill in some of the outer details. It's not going to try to fill in any gaps or open spaces. So if you already had a very complete 3D model, the unwatertight version would be very fast and probably effective. For most of mine, because I'm always going to have little openings and gaps, areas that it couldn't quite see, I want to go watertight. I wanted to use the software to fill in those missing details. So we're going to go watertight. And then we have some options for detail. Again, depending on what your model is, if it's very geometric shapes, low detail is probably more than sufficient. Here we're looking at extremely fine detail, right? Extremely small object, lots of fine surface details. I want it to do its best to try to extrapolate and fill in the same finer details in the missing areas. Let's see what happens. Now, the one trade-off before we click, or I'll click on it because I can talk, is the higher the detail, the longer it takes. Now, you'll see that did not take particularly long. It's not a very large object, and we can see here that the final object filled in some of those missing spaces around the, I don't know what I'd call those, ears, lobes, eyeball extensions. And now let's take a look underneath. And as we would expect, because there was almost nothing to go on, it filled in, and then just said, okay, you know what? I have no other data in this area to really extrapolate. I'm going to just make it flat. Fill it in, make it flat. But here's the key. Depending on what I want to print or how I want to print it, this may be completely sufficient. And in a matter of, if I wasn't talking to you, that came out wrong, and I'm sorry. If I wasn't talking through it so much, then, 5 minutes, I've got a 3D scan ready to go. Maybe a little bit of fine tuning, but honestly, in this case, I think our scan came out really well. One pass, 8 scans, non-textured. Look at that. And then using the software to fill it in. By the way, all of the software I'm using is what comes with the 3D scanner. There is no additional purchases that I had to make to do this. The only other software I potentially would use, other than my slicing software for printing it, which came with my printer, 3D printer, is Mesh Mixer, right? If I wanted to go in and merge, change, or do other things, which, by the way, Mesh Mixer is open source and free to use. So let's take a step back. Let's go back to scan. It's going to ask us do you really want to do that? You want to give up everything you've set up so far? We're going to say, yep, we're okay with that. Now it keeps our scan, which is great. So we could, if we wanted to go back, let's say you do the mesh mixing, it fills in. You're like, yeah, I don't really like that, or I think I'm going to do another scan. Or honestly, you may decide you want to start from scratch. You can always go back, undo kind of everything back to your original sets of scans. Here's something else I also found really interesting. Depending on the number of scans you have, you can make, especially for larger or more complex items, you may scan it once, twice, multiple different angles, and end up with, instead of 8 scanned images, you may end up with 12, 40. The number really, in theory, is unlimited. You just keep scanning. And what you might find is, you know what? Everything looks good, but I just really wish it had done a better job on this little side over here. So one of the things you can do is also choose if any of the scans that you made, whether it's a group here, which of course if I get rid of my whole group, it disappears, or if you find, there's a couple of artifacts in the back I really didn't like, you can actually remove some or all of the scans. Now, I find this to be much more effective if you do more than 8 scans, if you do a much larger number, because obviously when it's only using 360 degrees and dividing it by 8, that's only 8 different angles. Removing one is removing a good piece of that pie, right? A good section. If you have more smaller divisions of that 360 degrees, you might find, oh yeah, there's a little bit on the back I don't like. I can take 1 or 2 of those scans out, and it literally removes them from your final product. So my goal has always been to not have to do that. Try to set up the model in a way on the turntable so that you get the best possible scans from all angles. But the reality is sometimes that's just not possible, especially with very intricate 3-dimensional items. In which case, I have used this and it's been very helpful, especially if I find, let's say I did want to do the bottom, right, as a separate set of scans. Well, of course, even at 8, it's going to go and turn this around and take 8 different scans. But you know what? I might only want 3 of those. The 3 that get the bottom. I don't want it trying to fill in more stuff around the top. I don't want it potentially, I might just say, hey, give me what I need, which is just a little bit on the bottom to add in those missing details. Dump the rest. I don't need the rest of those scans. And you can do that, and you can visualize it very easily using the toggles, the visual toggles for each of the different scans that you've made. So what we're going to do now is we're going to destroy this. We're going to go ahead and say we're going to take this group, we're going to delete that data, and we're going to say, yep, we are okay deleting that data. Starting over. Do you want to quit? And I am going to say yes. Why? Because unfortunately the software will not let me change from non-texture to texture without basically resetting the scanner. So we're going to go back to device. We're going to reselect our device, let it initialize. Give it a moment. We're going to go with new work. Again, we're just going to pick just a name. We'll call this. Ooh, it really helps if I can type test 1. Now we're going to go texture scan. We're going to go back to those texture scans like I did in my first video. I'm going to go ahead and hit apply. Now, really nothing else has changed except now with the object we're going to scan, we're going to be scanning for texture and getting some color and details along with that. And for that, I'm going to use this infinity gauntlet. And you can see it is only maybe about an inch, inch and a half tall. It is not large at all. And that's really been my focus. I know there's other scanners out there, and I know based on what you're scanning, they might work really well for larger size items. But for small, fine, detailed items, I have yet to find one, especially in the price range of the Einscan, that has given me the quality and simplicity. Let me just say it's not just quality. For me, I don't want to spend hours manipulating, working my scanner. I want to scan, I want to go, I want to print, move on. So we're going to go ahead and take this infinity gauntlet. We're going to set it directly in the center of our turntable here. No other changes need to be made. I'm going to leave it with HDR, leave it at 8 turns, and we're going to go ahead and start scanning. All right, so our scan is completed. Let's take a look. So the first thing I'm going to do is zoom out just a little bit. And as I zoom out, we can see that that scan came out very good. Now, again, some of the top items that the scanner can't see as clearly. We have some gaps. But overall, it looks really good. Really, really good. Now, here's what I wanted to talk about. Because we're taking images and overlaying them of the 3D object, we really want to be sure that what we see is indicative of what we're going to get. Sometimes, not always, but sometimes the 3D the photograph image overlaid on top gives us a sense of, wow, that looks perfect. But that's a picture overlaid on the object. We want to actually know what the object underneath looks like. So let's take a quick, we're going to accept this. We can see our item. Let's zoom out a little bit, right? So we can see our item. Let's turn it around a little bit. Okay, it looks pretty good. We can see we lost a little bit on the fingers. Not too bad. I bet you the mesh mixer fill will take care of that. But let's scroll around here to kind of this area on top, right? Because we really want to see those details in the arm, in where the jewels are, the infinity stones go, all of that. We're missing a little bit here. Let's go ahead and take a look using this show hide texture option, because that's what we want to see, right? And we can let me do that again. So first we see these details. Wow, it looks really good. Get rid of that. Now we see the actual texture underneath, right? We see what actual details. If I was to 3D print this, this would be far more indicative of what I should expect to see. And we've lost a little bit of quality. So again, looking here, this shows us a jewel. It shows us the various kind of lines, the texture of the fingers, the mobility of them. I removed that overlay, and I've lost a little bit of that detail here. It caught the image of it, but it wasn't able to fully scan the 3D texture of it. So let's go ahead and take this to the next step. Let's go ahead and mesh. Let's optimize the model. Gives us a nice view there. Let's put on our texture just so we can see it. I'm going to go ahead and mesh this model. We're going to go with watertight. I'm going to go with high detail again. Now, before we watched the high detail of our first object, which had no texture, and it was very quick. This was pretty quick as well. Now, here we go. Take a look at this. Look at these details. This looks great. If I was using this for 3D animation, 3D modeling, this would be a great start. Great start. Look at the colors. You can actually make out each of the individual infinity stones. Little bit of corrections needed to be made, but really, again, one set of scans, only 8 individual scans going around. Overall, this looks really good. Let's rotate it around a little bit. That's, of course, where it was sitting on the base, so it's just completely flat and filled it in, which is nice. Scroll around to the other side. You get that nice texture of the armband. Look, you get all the little textures in the palm. Looks really good. But again, let us ensure that we're not being misled by the image on top of our 3D model. So let's focus in right on this area here. It's a great example of, I see lots of great fine details in the palm, a lot of these details around here. Let us look at it without our actual overlay. And ultimately, I think this is really good. We still have all of these little details here. We have the details here. We've lost a little bit. Let's compare. No, actually, it's probably not too bad. That's pretty flat in the image. It's pretty flat here. We've got those images and the fingers. We have a little bit of webbing going on. It caught in between the fingers and filled them in. It didn't know what to do with those gaps, so it ended up filling in the fingers. I'll talk about that in a second, a way that we can correct for that. But just look. Let's roll it around. And again, let's look at it with overlay. Nice detail, nice color, and what we would expect from our, if we were to print it, for example, in resin, with the details that we would get. And it really is, for the quickness that we did it, in really good shape. There might be a little bit of touch-ups I would do here to straighten up these lines, maybe a little bit here to add a little more definition around. And there's really, again, two ways that I can accomplish this. The first way is I could save it exactly as it is, go into Mesh Mixer, manipulate it, and try to make those corrections. The other way to approach that, though, would be doing both rescan it exactly as I did, but instead of only 8 scans, do multiple scans, do 12. The highest I've ever really gone is 18. I mean, after 18, if you're not getting it, there's something else going on, right? But 12 would probably get a little bit more finer details, especially like in between these fingers, etc. And then secondly, I might want to take a second scan. I want to scan it at a different angle where it might have a better job seeing between those fingers or seeing some of those other details. And that way, when the two different scans at two different angles are matched and paired up, you're really going to get some of those finer details. So there's a few different ways to approach it, but the key message here is make sure you're always checking your textured, your scan without the overlay texture, because that will tell you what to expect if you're going to 3D print this item and the overall quality. So there you go, with 1 year later, looking at the Einscan SP and some of the things that I've learned just through experimentation and trying different things to get the ultimate quality that I'm looking for. Now, again, the Einscan really hasn't changed in price in a year. It's still rolling around $2,500. Not a small investment, not something for just a little bit of maybe hobby time, when you're looking at that dollar amount. But if you're serious about 3D scanning, especially if you want to do 3D animation or 3D printing, I think the Einscan is absolutely still the best I've seen on the market. It really comes down to time. For me, I have tried several other different scanners in a variety of different price ranges. The ones that end up being really cheap didn't get nearly the quality I needed. Just couldn't even manipulate them after the fact. It's just they weren't there. In about the $1,000 to $1,200 range, better, but missing some of those key features like HDR and some of the lighting offsets, still had to manipulate quite a bit, usually having to do multiple scans, rescans, trying it at different angles. It was a lot of times. I do not want to spend a great deal of time having to work on an object and manipulate it after the fact. I want to scan, print, and go. And this one has really made that possible across almost everything that I have wanted to do it, use it for. So I appreciate you taking the time to listen to this video. If you enjoyed this video, I have another video from a year ago. We're going to put the link down in the comment section. I welcome your comments and your feedback. What did you think? Do you have an Einscan? Are you looking at one? Do you have questions that I have not answered? Feel free to put them in the comment section. And of course, if you've liked this video, go ahead and click subscribe. Until then, I'm Dave Floss with Prometheus Falling Toys and Mentally Imbalanced, thanking you again and hoping you have a great day.